Within the last year, Pakistan saw massive floods that submerged about one-third of the country, a massive increase in terrorism and sky-high inflation that brought Pakistani economy close to a collapse. And all of this is happening while the Prime Minister of the nation was forced out of the office. And this is a nuclear-capable country that we are talking about, no small country. On the other side of the fence, there is India, which is no Switzerland but is still doing a lot better, and in many ways is on the right track to compete with China. Both the countries share a lot of history as they were both just one country till they got their independence from Britain in 1947. For almost 4 decades, Pakistan led India in terms of GDP and economic progress. However, in the recent 2 decades or so, India has taken over as the leader. So what went wrong and how come Pakistan is at the verge of an economic collapse today? That's exactly what we break down in today's show, so let's get started.
Pakistan is facing an increase in attacks by the Pakistan Taliban.
The Pakistani Taliban, known as the TTP, has stepped up its activity.
We are fighting for Imran Khan!
India and Pakistan got their independence from Britain in August of 1947. At the time of independence, India and Pakistan inherited a very underfunded and neglected economy from Britain. From 1900 to 1947, under the British rule, the GDP growth rate was as little as 0.9%. During the British occupation of the subcontinent, very little was done to invest in the human capital, or the industries, or education, or pretty much anything that would prepare the country for self-governance one day. As a result, the literacy rate of the country was as low as 17%. During the British occupation of the country, millions were dying every year due to hunger and malnourishment. Vast majority of these deaths were preventable through proper management of resources and through proper policies. At the time of independence, the life expectancy was in its mid-30s, one of the lowest in the world even for those days. At the time of independence, Britain divided the subcontinent into West Pakistan, East Pakistan, and India, effectively sandwiching India in the middle. In the first few decades, Pakistan was leading India in terms of economic progress. Not by much, but regardless to say, it was a bit better than India. India had adopted protectionist trading policy, where everything had a government influence or a government control, like a socialist country would. Meanwhile, Pakistan, on the other hand, was open for business. The main drivers of Pakistan's initial success were the agricultural exports like jute, tea, and cotton from East Pakistan. However, this wouldn't last forever. You see, ever since the formation of Pakistan, there was a divide that started emerging between the East and the West Pakistan. Apart from the common religion, the two had no cultural similarities. Furthermore, even though East Pakistan had a larger population than the West Pakistan dominated the country politically and received more money from the common budget while contributing a smaller portion to the GDP. The people and politicians in East Pakistan wanted control over their fate and their economy. The 2 decades after the independence saw the rift between the two nations widening. And finally, in 1971, East Pakistan separated from West, with great support from, of course, India. India, due to its obvious reasons, didn't like the idea of having Pakistan on both sides of it. After all, both the nations had fought 2 wars within the first 2 decades of their existence. East Pakistan, after independence, renamed itself as Bangladesh. And my favorite part is that Bangladesh has a higher GDP per capita than both Pakistan and India, the same country that helped it get its independence. Just looking at the GDP numbers, it's quite clear that the loss of Bangladesh was a significant blow to Pakistan, but it doesn't explain the whole issue. For understanding the rest of the story, we have to look at 2 issues that worked simultaneously against Pakistan. You see, from the day these countries got their independence, they inherited a very broken system with millions who needed to be fed. So obviously the countries were reliant on foreign aid. Pakistan was receiving a lot of its grants and aid from America and Middle East, especially from Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. On the other hand, India was a socialist country. Even though it has always maintained the idea of being a neutral country, it relied a lot more on the Soviet Union for grants and aids. As the Soviet Union is collapsing in 1991, India is also looking at the biggest economic crisis that it had ever experienced. It was at this point, when their closest trading partner is disappearing, that India introduced economic reforms. And it is the impact of those reforms that have changed the economic fates of the 2 countries. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the foreign aid has just kept coming in. Until the end of the Afghan war, there was ample amounts of foreign aid coming into the country. You see, when you have access to free money, there is literally no incentive the politicians have to do any kind of economic reforms within the country. The second factor that has led to the decline of Pakistan is its political structure. You see, upon independence and the partition that followed, India inherited Indian National Congress, a political party that was quite evolved and durable. It had already existed for 65 years at that point. The Indian Congress Party had a lot of good regional leaders connecting the party to the masses. Meanwhile, Pakistan was being run by Muslim League, which didn't have a lot of strong leaders apart from Jinnah, the founder of the country and Muslim League. Unfortunately, Jinnah died in 1948, just 1 year after forming the country. This left the country with a huge power vacuum, with a very weak political system and a very strong military. And of course, 3 years after his death, Pakistan saw its first military coup in 1951. From there on, the Pakistani military has never really let go of the power. Since the formation of Pakistan and in its 75 years of existence, not a single leader that was elected by the people has finished one full term in the office. Every time there is a threat to the military's control, they either do a coup or they just act in the shadows and change the person in power. Over the years, the rich in the country, especially the top people of the military and their friends and family, have gotten richer, thanks to all the foreign aid that's coming in. Meanwhile, in India, the first Prime Minister was Nehru, who was head of the state from 1947 to 1964. That is a long time. And one of the biggest achievements of his time were introduction of checks and balances to keep India's strong military from overthrowing the government. The military of Pakistan is so involved with the politics of the nations that when the last Pakistani Prime Minister tried to bring some reforms, he was forced out of the office and a new government was put in place. And the whole event had the military involvement written all over it. The current economic crisis they're facing is perhaps the worst they've ever seen. This is a direct result of their foreign aid drying up because all the countries that have traditionally provided them with foreign aid have stopped doing so till they do certain economic reforms. But in order to do economic reforms, the same military that profits from these reforms not happening has to lose power. To summarize, Pakistan has lost one of its key streams of revenue in the form of Bangladesh. But further, Pakistan's dependency on foreign aid and its inability to bring major reforms has caused them to fall behind. So much so that if the pattern continues, we may have a nuclear power on the verge of a breakdown. With the rise in Taliban's power in Afghanistan and the increasing terrorist attacks, the situation is getting worse. And that is one situation no one wants to deal with. That's it for this video, and I'll see you in a week's time from now. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel. Depending on how this video does, I might make another video about why literally no prime ministers in Pakistan have ever finished an office. If you feel like I should make such a video, please leave a comment down below.